My name is Elise Warren. And 3 weeks after my parents' funeral, my brother told me I didn't belong in the only home I'd ever known. He looked straight at me and said, "Dad decided years ago sons inherit. Daughters take what they're given." I asked if that was what he really believed or just what made his life easier. He didn't answer. Just changed the locks the next morning. I stood on the porch watching him carry out boxes of my things, each one dripping rain into the grass. He said, "You should be grateful I'm even letting you take this much." The word grateful cut deeper than anything else because it sounded practiced. Like he'd said it 100 times before. He always measured worth by ownership. And I had none. When I picked up the last box, he called out, "Maybe now you'll learn to stand on your own." I wanted to tell him I already had. That taking care of Mom through chemo was standing on my own every single day. But I didn't. Silence has a sharper edge when someone expects you to beg. That night, I sat in my car with everything I owned piled around me. The engine ticked in the cold, the windshield fogging with my breath. Among the papers and old hospital pay stubs was a small silver pen Mom had given me months before she died. Inside the barrel was a folded slip of paper with an address written in her handwriting, * Dana Carlisle, 47 Court Street, Boston. Tell her I kept my promise. *. I stared at it for a long time before realizing it wasn't just a message. It was a map out of everything my brother thought I would never escape. When I came back 2 days later to collect what was left, Ryan stood in the doorway with his arms crossed and said, "You shouldn't still be here. Elise, the house isn't yours." I told him Mom's flowers were still blooming by the porch and her coffee mug was still in the sink. But he only laughed and said, "Dad built this place with his hands. You think changing IV bags earns you ownership?" His tone made the walls feel smaller. Like every memory I had here belonged to someone else. I said quietly, "I changed the oxygen tanks that kept Mom breathing while you checked your phone during her chemo. Do you stay?" He called me sentimental, said I was clinging to things that didn't matter, then gestured toward the boxes stacked by the curb. Tiffany leaned against the doorframe, swirling her wine and watching like it was a show she'd already seen. "Maybe you'll find an apartment that matches your income," she said, her voice coated in sugar and spite. The way she said income made me wonder if she even knew what earning something meant. I told her, "Mom thought you had class." She was wrong. Ryan barked. "Don't talk to my wife like that," I answered. "Then maybe you should start listening to your sister." He followed me to the driveway, muttering that I was ungrateful, that Dad would be ashamed. I turned and asked, "Ashamed that I worked or ashamed that I didn't marry money?" He didn't respond, just pointed toward my car and said, "Take your charity boxes and go." Each word felt rehearsed, the kind of authority he'd practiced in every conversation with Dad. When I lifted the last box, the rain began again, soft and steady, soaking through the cardboard like the house itself was pushing me out. That's when I noticed the mailbox. Its paint chipped, the flag rusted half up, and inside a small envelope sealed in wax. The handwriting was Mom's, her loops firm despite the tremor she'd had at the end. It held nothing but my name and a single silver pen pressed between folded pages. The storm behind me was loud, but the silence inside that envelope was louder. It was the first time I understood that my mother had left me something no one else could touch, a way out that began the moment Ryan said I didn't belong. The next morning, I drove to the address written in Mom's handwriting, Dana Carlisle, 47 Court Street. The brass letters on the door looked worn but steady, the kind of place where rules outlived people. When I introduced myself, the woman behind the desk smiled faintly and said, "Your mother told me you'd come. I'm Dana Carlisle. And yes, I've been expecting you." Her calmness didn't match the storm still sitting in my chest. It made me realize she already knew the kind of wreck I was walking out of. She asked if I knew what my mother had set up. And when I said no, she opened a drawer and pulled out a slim folder with my name on it. "Your mother began this process 6 years ago," she said, tapping the papers with her pen. "She transferred several assets into a living trust under your name property. Savings, and a small investment account. Nothing your father or brother could touch." I remember blinking. Half convinced I'd misheard her. I said, "She didn't even have her own income." Dana nodded. "She did. Quietly. She had help from your grandmother. Structured as legal gifts." The air in that office felt heavier the more she spoke. I asked what that meant for Ryan, and Dana replied, "It means his claim to the house was never valid. The deed was transferred to your mother's name 5 years ago for liability protection, and she never transferred it back. Upon her death, ownership passes directly to you." She slid a certified copy across the table, the seal shining faintly under the lamp. I traced the line where Mom's signature ended. Neat and deliberate. And whispered, "He threw me out of a house that wasn't his," Dana said softly. "Yes. And you don't need to tell him that yet. There's a formal reading in 2 weeks. Let him believe what he wants until then." White head. I asked why Mom hadn't told me. Dana said, "Because she knew you'd try to protect him. Catherine wanted this to be clean, no arguments. No guilt. Just the truth standing on its own." Her precision left no room for interpretation. Every sentence landed like a verdict already rendered. I sat back, staring at the pen still in my hand. The same one that had led me here. The ink inside shimmered faintly when I turned it under the light, as if reminding me that Mom's handwriting had always been a step ahead of everyone else's. When I left the office, Dana's final words followed me out the door. "Your mother didn't plan for revenge. Elise. She planned for justice. Devised by Cosette." 3 nights later, my phone rang at 10. Ryan didn't bother with greetings. He went straight to the point. "We don't have to make this ugly. Elise, I'm offering you $8,000 if you sign a waiver not to contest the estate." I asked if that was supposed to be generosity or guilt. And he said, "It's a chance to start over. You don't want months of lawyers draining what little there is." His voice had that thin edge he used when pretending to sound rational. I said, "You're offering money you don't have." There was a pause before he replied. "What are you talking about?" I told him I'd heard about the late payments on his business loan. The missed mortgage. The silence that follows a man who's run out of credit. He exhaled hard and said, "Don't make this harder than it has to be. You'll lose anyway." I answered, "You said the same thing to Mom when she disagreed with Dad's will." The static between us hummed like a warning neither of us wanted to hear. He tried one last time. "Be reasonable. Elise, this is your last good offer." I said, "The last good offer you made me was a box in the rain." The silence stretched until he finally muttered, "You're going to regret this." I told him, "Maybe, but at least it'll be mine to regret." When the call ended, the quiet in the room felt deliberate. The kind of silence that tells you someone has just realized they're running out of moves. The conference room smelled faintly of polished wood and tension. Ryan sat at the head of the table like he'd already won, his cufflinks catching the light each time he adjusted his sleeves. Tiffany whispered something to him about keeping this short, and he nodded as if he were the one running the meeting. Dana Carlyle placed 2 folders before her and said evenly, "We'll begin with your father's will, then proceed to your mother's. Both documents are legally binding and witnessed." Her tone left no room for interruptions, though Ryan tried anyway. He leaned back and said, "This shouldn't take long. Dad was clear business to me. Everything else divided fairly." Dana replied, "That's correct. Robert Warren's will was executed 14 months ago. His assets, including his tools, accounts, and vehicle, go primarily to you. Elise receives 30% of the remaining liquid assets. Ryan smiled like a man whose expectations had been met. 30% of leftovers, he said, glancing at Tiffany. That's generous considering she contributed nothing. I asked if caregiving counted as nothing, but he only shrugged. Dana continued without pause. We'll now move to Catherine Warren's estate. 19-0'd. Ryan's posture shifted. Why? Everything she had came from Dad. Dana met his eyes. That's not accurate. He laughed sharply. She was a schoolteacher. You think she hid a fortune in coffee cans? Dana opened the second folder and said, Your mother established a living trust 6 years ago. The trust holds title to the family home, 2 savings accounts, and a managed investment portfolio. Elise Warren is the sole trustee and beneficiary. Tiffany's wine-colored lipstick tightened as she muttered, That can't be right. Ryan snapped. It's impossible. The house was Dad's. Dana answered. It was until your mother transferred ownership into her name for liability protection. The deed remains valid. I think that's so, Day. He slammed his palm against the table. You're saying she tricked him? Dana said. She protected herself. The deed was filed with the county clerk. And here is the certified copy. She slid the paper toward him. He scanned the page, his voice cracking on the last word. She never told me, I said quietly. She didn't need your permission. Ryan shot me a glare that could have set fire to paper. You knew about this, he said. I told him I didn't. That I was learning the same time he was. Don't lie to me. A hissed. You always play the innocent one, Dana interrupted. This proceeding is not for personal accusations. Let's finish. Ah. Tiffany spoke for the first time above a whisper. So, what does that mean? Exactly? Dana's tone remained steady. It means the house at 127 Maple Drive, valued at $470,000, belongs solely to Elise. In addition, the trust holds investments currently worth $470,000 and cash assets of $470,000. Total estate value, $940,000. Ryan laughed once, short and hollow. That's convenient math. You expect me to believe she built $1 million empire from a teacher's salary? Peg, seated beside me, said. No. Ryan. She built it with foresight. I helped her fund it through structured gifts. His voice cracked. You helped her hide money from me. She answered softly. I helped her protect what you would have wasted. Oh. Ryan turned to Tiffany, but she was already staring down at her hands. You said we were fine, she whispered. You said everything was under control. He ignored her, pointing at Dana. You people think you can rewrite history. Dad made me executor. Dana replied. Executor of his estate. Yes. Not hers. Separate accounts. Separate designations. Separate authority. He tried to sound calm, but desperation leaked into every syllable. Mom wasn't well 6 years ago. She was on medication. This is manipulation. Dana produced a small flash drive and placed it on the table. Your mother anticipated that claim. This contains a video statement recorded during the trust's creation. She is lucid, deliberate, and evaluated by Dr. Nottersays. Megan Holt, a board-certified psychiatrist. If you contest. This video and the medical evaluation will be presented in probate court. Ah. He stared at the flash drive like it was a weapon aimed directly at him. Tiffany whispered. You said there was no debt. Peg's voice cut through her disbelief. There's plenty of debt. Dear. Your mortgage. The business loan. The unpaid taxes. Ryan barked. You think you know my life? She answered. Catherine knew. She knew you were drowning long before you did. The color drained from his face. I said, that's why you needed the inheritance. You weren't trying to honor Dad's legacy, you were trying to pay your creditors. Ryan shouted. I built that company from nothing, I told him. Then it shouldn't collapse without her money. The room went still. The kind of silence that lands after someone says what everyone else was afraid to admit. Dana adjusted her glasses and said, if there are no further objections, the trust's terms are final. Elise will assume full ownership of the property and accounts immediately. Ryan, you retain your father's business interests and personal effects, he muttered, which are worth nothing. Dana's tone didn't change. That's not for me to judge. I looked at him then. The man who had once held my hand crossing the street when we were children. Now gripping the edge of the table like it was the only thing keeping him upright. You told me daughters get what they're given. I said. Turns out Mom gave me everything she couldn't give herself. It's Nozo. He stood up. Unsteady. His eyes wild. You can't just walk away with this, he said. You don't even deserve it, I replied. Then it's a good thing Mom didn't ask your opinion. Tiffany tried to stand beside him, but he brushed her off. You'll regret this. Elise, when the dust settles, you'll see what you've done, I said. No. Ryan, I finally see what you did. Peg placed her hand over mine and whispered, your mother would be proud not for the money, but for the calm. Dana closed the folder with a final minute. Deliberate sound and said, this concludes the reading of the wills. Ryan didn't move. He just stared at the documents as if they were written in a language he could no longer understand. Tiffany whispered, we should go, and guided him toward the door. His voice, when it came, was barely more than breath. She planned this, I said. Yes, she planned for justice. As the door closed behind them, I realized Mom had chosen the one weapon Ryan never expected: preparation. It wasn't revenge. It was accountability wrapped in her handwriting. Months passed before I heard anything about Ryan again. Peg told me he'd lost the company after defaulting on his loans. And Tiffany had filed for divorce 2 weeks later. When she said it, I only nodded. There was no satisfaction left in me. Just the quiet recognition that some storms don't need help finishing themselves. I used part of the trust to repair the house. Not to erase the past, but to make it livable again. The lavender Mom planted along the fence had started to wilt. So I replanted it in the same rows she once tended. Peg visited one afternoon, carrying a small wooden box polished smooth from years of handling. She handed it to me and said, your mother asked me to give you this when everything settled. Inside was the original draft of the trust, written in Mom's careful script beside a single silver pen identical to mine. I told Peg. She planned everything. Didn't she? And she smiled faintly. She did. Elise. But not for revenge. She wanted you free. The way she said free made it sound heavier than money. I asked if Mom ever doubted her plan. And Peg shook her head. She said you'd understand someday. I think this is that day. The sun was setting through the kitchen window, catching the edge of the paper like a quiet signature. Later that evening, I sat on the porch watching the new lavender sway in the wind. The house felt lighter, as if it had finally exhaled. I whispered, you kept your promise, Mom. And for the first time since the reading, I believed it. Justice hadn't come in a roar. It had come in her handwriting. Precise and permanent. The kind of justice that doesn't need to shout to be heard. I kept working at the hospital, though the weight on my shoulders had changed shape. Money didn't fix anything. It just gave space for peace to grow. When I walked through the garden, the lavender smelled the same as it did when Mom was alive. Steady and clean. a reminder that healing isn't loud. If you've ever been told you're less, remember that silence can still hold power. Thank you for staying with me until the end of my story. Tell me where you're watching from and share one promise someone once kept for you. I read every single one.